What happens to the face of our plates if U.S. farmers can no longer grow the foods that we take for granted? Welcome back to Rooted and Restless. I'm your host, Marianne Smith Edge. At a time when the U.S. is looking for farmers to grow more fruits and vegetables, we're also seeing scenarios of traditional foods no longer being grown or having difficulty due to climate and other issues. So how do we change that? And what's the insight? Well, today my guest, and a return guest, is Amy Myrdal Miller, registered dietitian, a farmer's daughter, and owner of Farmer's Daughter Consulting Group. Amy, it's always so fun to have you on the show, and the good news, we can talk about food from farm to table, which we're going to do today. So I think probably the first question that would be asked by people who are listening, because we're going to talk about something that's on the other side of the west of the coast of where you live. Why are two dietitians, not Florida residents or owners of orange groves, talking about a particular item that we'll just frame as the case of orange juice? So Amy, I picked up the phone or basically email when I'm seeing all these headlines about the challenges, of course, that orange grove growers have definitely had over the years, and said, hey, do you know anything about this? And you jumped in and said, would love to talk about it.
Oh, well, Marianne, thank you for inviting me back. I love getting opportunities to have smart, spirited discussions with you about these very important and interesting issues in our food system. So yeah, we are here today to talk about what is casually called citrus greening. It is a disease in the global citrus industry, started in Asia by a little bug called the Asian citrus psyllid. And this greedy little bugger loves nothing more than to suck on the juices of new growth of citrus trees. And it's particularly fond of the Valencia orange trees that produce the oranges that produce orange juice. And this little bug often carries a bacteria that causes a disease that essentially kills the central fluid system in citrus trees, and they slowly die. The fruit becomes smaller, less green, less orange in color. It tends to stay green. It loses its ability to produce higher Brix or higher sugar orange juice. And it has been a huge challenge for the citrus industry around the world, but particularly here in the US and Florida. So I am glad that we get a chance to dig deeper into this and to talk about the future of the citrus industry in Florida and other parts of our country.
Well, and I think you've actually worked with the Florida group previously, and so that it definitely gives you even more insight in that regard. And you're right, the citrus greening, I became familiar with it probably about 15 years ago when I worked in DC, and growers or a grower organization was looking at, what were the alternatives? Is it a genetically modified orange, which we know gets pushed back from consumers at times? So obviously it's been going on for a while, but I think also, some of the other challenges they've had maybe kind of sets the stage for how farmers are pivoting to look at new ways to grow the oranges.
Yeah, I mean, the Florida citrus industry has looked at a lot of different research, science, technology, and innovation to address this issue. Back when I was touring groves, when I was doing some consulting for the Florida orange juice industry, we were touring groves where every single tree not only had its own drip irrigation system to give the water and nutrients that tree needed at that time, but another system to drip antibiotics essentially to help stop the production of this bacteria in the trees. The cost of just that application of antibiotics to the trees was more than the trees were producing in terms of fruit. So this was not a solution that was going to save the industry. This was killing small farmers very quickly. They couldn't even make the investment. Large farmers were seeing that 5 years from now, we are out of the money, we are out of the business. So the next approach was working with universities in Florida, as you mentioned. Is there a gene editing or genetic modification option? That research was humming along, and they had a 50-acre grove of trees that they were monitoring. And guess what hit Florida and destroyed that research project? A
Yeah.
hurricane. Yeah. So there was some promise there, and I believe the gene that was selected came out of spinach. So you're moving something from spinach into orange juice to potentially make the trees resistant to the bacteria. It was looking promising, but no conclusive results. The next alternative was completely changing the industry. You and I know as dietitians, Americans started thinking that they should not have their morning glass of orange juice because it's too much sugar. I'm not going to drink the juice. Well,
I still drink it every morning.
I do as well. I always have a carton in my fridge. And one of the reasons I actually brought it back after that trip because part of that initial project was going through not only orchards, talking to growers, talking to researchers. We also toured big juice processing facilities. Did you know that when commercial orange juice is made, they crush the entire orange? And then the juice comes out and the peel, the pulp gets extracted, goes into the dairy cattle industry in Florida to feed dairy cows. And apparently dairy cows really love citrus pulp products in their feed rations. So it's not wasted. But one of the magical things about this is there's a compound present in oranges, but really concentrated in the peel that turns on a gene within our human bodies that helps us more quickly metabolize glucose. So, for everybody out there who thinks fresh squeezed juice is better, actually, if you're someone like me, I have type 1 diabetes, so I'm very thoughtful about how I select my carbohydrates and how much and how often and what they get paired with. For me, commercial orange juice is a better option because that compound that comes from that peel from a commercially processed orange juice product is in that glass of commercial orange juice, and it makes it easier for my body to metabolize that sugar. I'm also getting all the other benefits of orange juice, the other natural plant compounds, the vitamin C, the joy of getting an easy serving of fruit. So anyway, I think I've lost my train of thought on where I was going with this. But anyway, yeah, people quit drinking orange juice. There was less of a demand. So the industry was looking at, okay, well, what are people eating? Well, we were eating and still are more and more of those little easy to peel mandarins and tangerines. And what was discovered is that those types of citrus trees are not resistant to this bacteria, but they are tolerant. They don't get
Mhm.
the damage that the Valencia trees do. So there were more and more groves planted of those types of what they call out of hand citrus versus juice citrus. And people were starting to smile a little bit, that they were like, maybe I can save my family farm. Maybe we can't save the juice industry, but maybe we can have a productive crop that will continue to support this generation and future generations of family farmers. So the next chapter in the innovation, um, there were about 6 years between my first visit and my next visit, which happened in the spring of 2023. I got to visit in Central Florida a citrus cups facility, and cups is an acronym that stands for Citrus Under Protective Screen. And I think I misspoke. We were there, it was early March. So it wasn't really spring yet. It was still kind of wintry, and it was a very chilly day. And we all had our jackets on, and we tumbled off our little shuttle bus. And as we are about to enter the screen facility, our guide said, and this was the farm manager, he said, Y'all may want to slip off your jackets. It's pretty warm in here. And I was like already like warming my hands and touching my nose to see how cold it was. It was probably 45 degrees that morning. When you walked into the screen facility, yes, it was warmer. So the screens are this very fine mesh screen that a little Asian citrus psyllid can't get through, but air can flow through, sunlight can flow through, and the sunlight, when it flows through, it changes the UV rays and it
Mhm.
amplifies photosynthesis. So these little trees, we were in a like a ruby red or pink grapefruit facility, 11 acres, by the way. Like not a little greenhouse. This was 11 acres screened in. Anyway, these little ruby red trees had been planted the year before and were already producing fruit because of this faster photosynthesis, the faster growth of the trees, and also they were producing sweeter fruit, more desirable, delicious fruit. So that was absolutely fascinating. And as I was standing there listening to all of the exciting information from the farm manager, somebody said, and this is kind of like asking a Texas farmer, how big is your ranch? Somebody said, how much does it cost to do this? Well, it's about $1.1 million per acre.
One, you said $1 million per acre.
Per acre.
Yeah.
So 11-acre facility, over $12 million to build. How's that possible? Guess how? People with lots of money who want an investment they feel good about, those people are apparently surgeons around the country who group together as these small investments groups, and that is what is funding the citrus under protective screen operations in many parts of Florida. Surgeons.
Surgeons. Well, looking at health a different way, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I told you earlier before we started is I actually ran into a Floridian that plant scientist this week at a meeting who actually, unbeknownst to him that we were going to have this conversation on Friday, but I was asking him about the citrus industry, and he was positive. He felt like that some of the investments that you've just mentioned about climate control was working, but I think from what we witnessed, and as you said, hurricanes have really destroyed the orange groves as well. It's that it's helping to move the industry back, but nowhere where it was. I'm sure even when you were more closely aligned to it, just because of all the issues that has faced farmers. And I think that's the reality today's too. We've talked, I've talked to several farmers, is that it's an economic investment, and sometimes if you're too small, you just can't keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know 5, 10 years from now if there will be any orange juice coming out of Florida. It may be coming from areas of the world like Brazil, where they've had less of the impact of the Asian citrus psyllid and citrus greening. Um, but what I do know is that the resilience of farmers and in collaboration with research universities and others in the industry and investors, they're finding new ways to grow citrus in ways that are more relevant to how we want to eat and enjoy citrus today. I think it's also important, I'd mentioned that the Asian citrus psyllid came out of Asia, started having this impact in parts of Asia where they produce citrus. It's moved around the world because these little bugs like to hop in a box of oranges and travel with the fruit. It's affecting citrus production in Texas, in Arizona, here in California. As somebody with 3 backyard citrus trees, I get notices from my county when they are locking down a quarantine in a county and asking backyard farmers, I hate that term, but someone like me with a few citrus trees to watch for the impact of citrus greening. And they have quarantined baby trees coming out of nurseries because they've already seen the impact. So I think, one of the stories that I heard that was kind of most, I don't know, heartbreaking, one of the growers we met with on my first trip was talking about how hard he and his family were working to try to keep the citrus greening at bay and to figure out how they were going to manage this and manage financially moving forward when the guy or the family, one orchard over gave it up. Like they ran out of money. They just gave up, lost the farm, and those trees sat there dying, really infested because there were no controls. Some of the other things that the growers have done, putting in heat lamps. Citrus psyllids like a certain temperature. Trees are okay with intense heat. Putting in blowers just so the bugs can't get too comfortable as they're nibbling on the fresh growth on a tree. Anything to stay ahead of these little critters. And then also some techniques using pheromones to attract them out of the orchards, sterilizing the males so they can no longer breed. I mean, they've thrown a lot at this. They're continuing to throw a lot at this. And that brings me to the biggest point of our discussion today. As agriculture moves forward, it is about continually innovating practices that are practices in how the seeds are developed, the baby trees are developed, the crop protection products are developed, in field or in orchard practices, how things are handled after they're harvested. I went to a California Agriculture Issue Summit a few weeks ago here in Sacramento. And Marianne, this is something I've done every June for 5 years. And that morning, as I was getting ready, I was doing a little self-talk. Amy, this is going to be a tough day. You know that all the big issues are going to be discussed from different points of view. You're going to leave with a heavy heart. There's probably going to be some colorful language from the stage. There's going to be some anger. You just have to be ready for it. So I went in thinking it was going to be kind of depressing and hard. It was a great day because everybody finally said in California, not everybody, but people in attendance that day said, you know what? We got a lot of challenges. We got a lot of regulations. We got some real pressures with things like fertilizer prices, diesel prices, but we're California. We innovate. We find solutions. And that's not only true here in California. That is true across the United States. We are very blessed to live where we live and to have farmers and everybody in the ag community doing what they do to continue to produce for us.
And it's ironic that you said you just went to one. I was actually at a Farm Foundation meeting in St. Louis this week. So, innovation came up, but I think also some really realities is that to continue U.S. farming is not, of course, we've really put our eggs in the basket a lot of times on commodity crops, and knowing that trade and tariff has become an issue. So, I think there's continued, there were some great panels, though, of looking at innovation and some of it with some of the specialty crops, which you're so accustomed to working with. So I think my question, as we see, yes, innovation is so important, and that's why money for research is needed. And because I think you and I know because of where we've our roots, but the reality is just getting some food on a plate and just in the grocery store, it just doesn't happen magically. It's takes a lot of money. So my question to you, though, is I think there's a push, obviously, somewhat economically from what's going to happen in the big world of moving farmers to look at alternative crops. I would say maybe more in the fruits and vegetables specialty crop. But from your perspective, do you think that can happen? With all that how because every climate doesn't work in the U.S. We're not all California. So where do you think that might go?
Oh, wow. Are farmers looking at new ways to be financially sustainable? Yeah.
Right.
All the time. I mean, I'll share my North Dakota farmer's daughter, or farmer's sister perspective. My brothers in North Dakota are continually looking at, okay, what's going to be a stable or profitable market for me as they're doing crop planning in December, January. They're thinking about buying seed in February. They're thinking about going into the banker to talk about their operating loan for the next growing season. And so, they go gangbusters on certain crops, soy and corn. Well, if all the farmers are getting the same information and the same intuition, and they're all moving forward with soy and corn, is there a glut in the market? Does supply outweigh demand? Are prices soft? Um, so they then start diversifying for the next year, and all of a sudden they've got a bumper crop of flax, and flax prices are high, and it's really great. But oh, by the way, to grow flax, you need different equipment than you needed for corn and soy. So you've made a capital investment. It's an ongoing challenge to figure out in an operation where it's year by year planting what to do. I'm using air quotes when I say right to be financially sustainable or profitable. Here in California, where we are dominated by specialty crops as well, we also have row crops and we have animal agriculture, but a lot of specialty crop production here. These same things are true about the equipment. If you've been growing lettuce and you have lettuce harvesting crews and, the infrastructure for lettuce, are you going to switch to something like pomegranates? Well, no, because how long does it take for a pomegranate tree to start producing? Or likewise, if you've planted 1,000 acres of almonds and there's overproduction in almonds and prices are soft, you're not going to switch to something else. So, I think one of the blessings is for all of the specialty crops that have marketing orders and promotional boards that, help provide the marketing to create more demand. I did hear speaking of demand, that, this issue with tariffs and trade and ongoing trade negotiations around the world. I wish I had my notes with me. It was about the almond market. And if India opened up its markets for California almonds, California wouldn't be able to supply enough. It's the largest population in
Right.
the world now, that because of eating patterns, they're tending to be vegetarian. The demand for almonds would likely be very high. And that, those kinds of things are said, and everybody in the audience gets like excited about opportunities. And then what if the prediction is the market opens, more trees are planted, and 5 years from now, almond prices are just in the basement or in the toilet? So all of this is to say that for those of us who aren't making these decisions every day, it's pretty easy for us to be making quick quips or criticisms. But farming is really hard. Most farmers have college degrees. They are very smart people. They are operating within family systems where there's a lot of negotiations to go on to agree how to move forward. And I think we all need to have more grace and gratitude about our attitudes and opinions and what we say about farming today. I'm just super, super grateful that I can go to my local grocery store and just buy the food.
Now, let's hear from Mindy Herman, registered dietitian, food and nutrition writer, and a guru on all the latest food trends.
Hi, Marianne and Amy. According to the USDA, U.S. citrus production definitely is in decline, at about 6 million tons in 2025, compared to 9 million tons 10 years earlier. About 85% of U.S. citrus is grown in California, compared with 13% in Florida. Mandarins and clementines are on the rise, while orange and grapefruit production generally is down. The greatest threats to the citrus industry include disease, weather, production costs, and labor force pressures. U.S. consumers are increasing their year-round demand for easy-to-peel, seedless varieties like mandarins and clementines, along with Meyer lemons, Cara oranges, and blood oranges. Use of statin drugs has contributed to decreased demand for grapefruits, since grapefruit and grapefruit juice should be avoided by people taking statins. Consumers may be drinking less orange juice, but they love citrus-flavored seltzers, waters, and energy drinks.
Now, let's return to our conversation. As well as going to the grocery store, I'm okay buying a carton of milk and not having to go out at 5 a.m., you know, and making sure that it's in that it's in the carton,
and that it's pasteurized.
And it's pasteurized. So we have it made, and sometimes our wishes and desires have made it even more difficult. But I think what you and I have talked about before we move to the food side, it is a supply and demand. And so not only a supply and demand from us, but, when I ask you about, do you think we can grow more fruits and vegetables? And so, every time I say that to my husband on land that we grow soybeans and corn, he goes, sure, we can buy broccoli. Just give me a market that's going to make it, to who's going to buy it, and you and I both know we've had some of our colleagues, and I've had fingers pointed at me like, why did I grow tobacco when I was growing up? Because that's where you did in Kentucky, but why didn't I grow tomatoes? And it's like, well, there was no market and there was no income, in that regard.
Well, and there was no infrastructure. I mean, you can grow something and have this amazing crop, and if there's no one to transport it, store it properly, process it, ship it, get it into distribution, that is a wasted crop, So that's something that gets forgotten. People talk about, well, if the soil health, well, every farmer is working to protect soil health because that's one of their most valuable assets. Yes, farmers can grow almost anything if they have the inputs, and the labor and the equipment, but that infrastructure piece is so critically important.
Yes, it's different than growing tomatoes in the backyard or herbs, the reality is. So to create demand, we're going to switch from the farm to the food and the plate. The good news is, for those of you that know Amy, she not only knows one side, but definitely takes it on into the kitchen. And, when you and I talked earlier this year, we mentioned I didn't forget, the cooking a la heart. And you mentioned you might talk about some of your favorite recipes. But I'm also going to just go ahead and say I have seen some photos that you have shared on social media about some new creations in the kitchens. And even though I know that you want to spoil your husband, I'm kind of thinking there's something else going on other than just trying a new recipe. So from new recipes to those that are favorite, I'm all ears.
Well, thank you. What a delightful opportunity for me to talk about my current passion project. My co-author of Cooking All Heart and I were notified by our publishers a few months ago. They want us to do another cookbook, fast track for release in early 2027, also focused on cardiovascular wellness. We have not confirmed a title yet, but we are moving quickly in that direction. Just like Cooking All a Heart, it will feature abundant use of fruits and vegetables in all their glorious forms. So while I've got that on my mind and I'm working on it, I'm also working for one of my clients, California Growin', on recipes that our colleagues, retail dietitians who work for supermarket chains all across the country, can use with their shoppers. And there's all of these trends about, it used to be like, well, the average American cook wants to spend 30 minutes or less preparing dinner each night. Now that's gotten down to like 21 minutes. The next one will probably be like 17 minutes. Okay, fine. It is what it is. Our lives and lifestyles change, right? And then it was, well, how many ingredients is okay? Well, 8 or more ingredients frightens the user and they move on to the next recipe. I gave myself a challenge with California Growin' of, could I do 2 ingredient recipes? So I think what you were seeing on Instagram last week were some of the 2 ingredient concepts, like peak of season cantaloupe. What can you combine with cantaloupe to make something kind of new and exciting that feels a little fancy but is super approachable? And that turned into a low alcohol, slushy drink called the Cantaloupe Cooler, where you take a sweet Moscato wine. And Marianne, I'd never bought one before.
I know. I can't imagine you're buying that. But anyway.
It's not what my palate goes for. But I stood in the supermarket and I was like, well, I know it needs to be sweet. It needs to pair well with cantaloupe. And so I studied and studied, and the one that had sweet in the largest letter from California is the one I picked. It turned out to be phenomenal and a really ripe cantaloupe. And, it's 4 parts cantaloupe to 1 part wine. I just gave you the recipe for free, people.
Yay,
You
yay.
blend it in the blender, and it's so amazing the consistency of it. It's aromatic. You've broken down all those cell walls, and all those volatile aromatic compounds come out. The Moscato is very aromatic to begin with. It's not cloyingly sweet. It's sweet. It's fruit sweet, and it's very low alcohol. Moscato is about 9.5% alcohol by volume. That beverage in the end is about 2% alcohol by volume. So with all the trends of people going no alcohol, low alcohol, okay, it's on trend for that. It's also on strategy for me as somebody who cares very passionately about cardiovascular wellness, that you're getting a fruit serving in a fun, easy, approachable way. And when it's 100 stinking degrees here in Sacramento, day after day after day, that is a lovely summer sipper. The other one is just super, again, like these are kind of dumb recipes, but part of it is the technique. Making a hot honey, but using jalapeno instead of dried chili product. And, if you're putting a jalapeno, a raw produce ingredient, into honey, honey has antibacterial properties, but honey can also create an anaerobic environment that certain bugs could get kind of excited about growing in. So I was like, well, what's the easiest kill step? Microwaving the jalapeno. You microwave
Excellent.
sliced jalapeno, and I decided to slice it because some people don't like too much heat intensity, so you can pull it out. However, that's kind of a misnomer because once it's steeped in there for a while, all the capsaicin is infused in the honey. But it also tells you exactly what you're getting. This is a hot honey with jalapeno. You see it, you know it. So that hot honey has been featured. We drizzled it on pizza one night. Yesterday, I used it on roasted sweet potatoes. That was a winner. That was a really, like, really, really good. The in-laws are coming over this weekend. We're planning on grilling tri-tip on Father's Day. I think it's going to get drizzled on the tri-tip and see how that works. A little meat plus sweet plus heat.
Okay, so this sounds so good, and I'm going to make it. So I promise I'll buy your book if you'll just give me a little more details.
So you want to use a honey that has like some character to it. Like, don't waste your beautiful orange blossom honey. Take like a good clover honey, a wildflower honey. It's 1 cup of honey and 1 large jalapeno. I measured it out. It's about a 1/4 cup of thinly sliced jalapeno. You microwave the jalapeno, like put it on a plate in your microwave so it's a thin layer. Microwave it for a minute. The jalapeno has this bright green color, but you've had a kill step. Then you just stir it into the honey, let it sit on your counter for about 24 hours. And then after that, you can put the honey in the fridge, put it in a jar, seal it up, use it as you want.
I am so excited. This is the best. I love all the information we've talked about, but the fact is, I've bought some hot honey. I haven't even tried to, to make it. So, but I think that's what you've just talked about, though, is how a simple ingredient change can truly change the flavor. But sometimes when we're thinking about this, we're not thinking about the food safety issues that you mentioned, which is extremely important as well.
Yeah, there's, when I was with the Culinary Institute of America, one of the certified master chefs always said flavor comes from only 2 places, ingredients and techniques. And so even with these, very simple 2 ingredient recipes that seem kind of dumb, you know, there's a lot of food science that goes into it. There's a lot of like flavor pairing science that goes into it. Um, anyway, I'm ridiculously passionate about this project. The other thing that I've made that is so good, it's just making my husband insane because my husband is a man who thinks a meal is not a meal without meat. But I have cracked the code for chorizo made with walnuts.
Oh, wow.
It
Okay.
is vegan chorizo that my husband, every time he eats it, is like, make this again, and you put meat in this, right? And I'm like, I did not put meat in it, and I will be happy to make it again. So, and I'm not a vegan. Like, I'm not a proponent of vegan. I'm a proponent of eating all the foods, but this was just another very simple concept. This is a 3 ingredient recipe with canned chipotles, onions, and walnuts. And you'd make it in about 15 minutes. What takes the most time? Cutting up the onions before sauteing them. So anyway, this is a passion project I will continue on. There may actually be, a cookbook just with these 5 ingredient or less recipes featuring specialty crop ingredients.
Well, I think that's exciting because you and I both know a lot of times, and I've had some conversations just in the last week or so. There, I did one on food waste, a podcast. So the good news is a lot of times if we buy fresh and then it's like, oh, I don't have time or don't know what to do with it, then just having fruits and vegetables on your counter or in your refrigerator doesn't really get us to where we need to be on eating more fruits and vegetables from a health standpoint.
I'm glad that you're still addressing food waste. And I say still addressing, it was like one of the most popular topics for us dietitians at our conferences a few years ago. It always needs to be there. It always needs to be top of mind because when we think about the resources that go into producing food, the labor, the on-farm inputs, the transportation, the storage, the retailing, the marketing of it, and then it comes into our home and we're like, throw it out. It's such a loss. And it's not just of the families, financial, but that's a big piece. I remember USDA data, and this is pretty old. I think it was like 2016. Average family of four, $1,600 a year they waste. And when
Exactly.
somebody said that's a trip to Disney, young moms were like, wait, what?
Exactly. Exactly. And it comes in we won't go off of the deep end here, but it also comes into the fact when we talk about sustainable and what's climate issues. I mean, you and I both know food waste is pretty big in that regard. So I'm hoping that going back to the cookbooks you already have, as well as the ones that are in progress, you can be a solution to two things. That solution that it keeps all of us eating more fruits and vegetables, but also really reducing that waste in that regard. So before we wrap it up, is there any other like brilliant insights on our favorite recipes? We're in the middle of summer, something that we definitely need to do to make sure that to use all the produce, because thank goodness in most of the world at this point, in most of the country, we can be California-like. We actually are growing vegetables, and farmers markets are open.
Yeah, again, like keeping it simple, peak summer tomatoes are really, really great in terms of flavor, color. They draw you in with their gorgeous color, the aromas. Um, Tomatoes are a higher potassium food, which means they need a little salt. So if you're not salting your tomatoes, just try a little bit. It'll draw out some of the water and intensify the flavor experience. If you have mint growing in your garden, that's like knocking on your door because it grows so quickly, mint with any peak summer fruit is great, with melons, with berries. Um, and then the ingredient that I now have fits if I don't have in my fridge year round is whole lemons, so I can zest the lemon. I think that lemon zest brightens up so many things. I put it in all my coleslaw now. I add it to store-bought dressings for salads. I put it in mashed potatoes. I mean, lemon zest just whew, brightens up everything, and gives you that flavor and aroma that is so appealing. At least to this farm girl from North Dakota who had a mom who somehow always had a lemon, despite North Dakota not being a citrus producing state.
Well, I just had those little containers of plastic lemons, because but well, Amy, I think people just need to maybe hear your voice every day at mealtime, or thinking about that. Oh, it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. So, so lemons are definitely for the zest and everything. Mint, which if it doesn't take, anybody can grow mint. That's for sure. I have it in a pot. And we know that if it's salt, it's kosher salt and it's diamond crystal salt, because that's what Amy says that it needs to be. And I would agree. So if you look at those three, and then hopefully run this back to get that recipe on hot honey. And the reality is we can have such a variety with such simple food, but make it so delicious. So Amy, we could go on for hours, but people probably don't want to keep listening for hours. So in that regard, always so insightful. But I think the reality here is, as truly farmers' daughters that we are, is that, the key is what is on our plate that we take for granted is really such an investment by the farmers, and who are truly the risk takers along the way to ensure that we actually have the food, and realize that, as we always say on this podcast, the story behind food is definitely not as simple as we think. And I think from orange juice to whatever could be the next issue, from weather to trade to the economic realities, it can be a challenge. But I think, Amy, also the key is we can grow it if we eat it. And so you provide such great insight. So as we wrap it up, any other words of wisdom to talk about how we need to get more of those fruits and vegetables in our diet and enjoy them?
Absolutely. I mean, if you are a listener and you think, I don't care about recipes, I don't want to make it myself, give yourself permission to do things like buy a carton of Florida orange juice, open it up and pour a glass. Give yourself permission to buy those frozen vegetables that are in the microwavable steam and bag. They are safe, they are the best quality, and it makes it easy. If you are somebody who won't eat a steamed green vegetable, or a microwaved green vegetable without some cheese on it, great, do that. Full fat dairy has protective benefits. This does not need to be hard. There should not be any guilt. There should not be any shame. There should be enjoyment, and there should be freedom to choose the preparation methods, or to choose things off menus that you love and you're going to eat again and again and celebrate.
Well, and I think that's what we can say. It's all about celebrating food and enjoyment. At the end of the day, food is joy. Food is about memories, and connects all of us. So thank you so much, Amy. Always a pleasure. And here's to a great summer.
Cheers, Marianne. What a fun conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Rooted and Restless. It's all about digging deeper into the behind the scenes about food, agriculture, and nutrition, because after all, every food has a story, and sometimes it's not as simple as it seems. Subscribe to Rooted and Restless wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us on YouTube.